For more, I want to bring in Senator Alex Padilla from California. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee. Senator, it's always a pleasure to see you on this day where there's been two major decisions from the Supreme Court. I want to start with these two decisions, the EPA decision and the decision on Remain in Mexico. How do you see things?
Well, obviously, a lot of big news happening today, Jose. Good to be back with you. Look, the decision on the Remain in Mexico program, unexpected, but we will take it and let it serve as a reminder, as the panel was discussing. Congress needs to act. Our immigration system remains broken. There's too much uncertainty. We recently celebrated the 10th anniversary of the DACA program, but yet hundreds of thousands of Dreamers are still in limbo because of pending litigation. We had this case moving forward. We have the Title 42 debate that's still happening. So a lot of work that still needs to happen, and Congress needs to act in the interest of not just immigrant communities, but in the interest of our economy. Immigrants play such an important role in so many essential sectors as essential workers that this needs to remain a priority, and we need to act sooner rather than later. And look, on the other decision coming from California, it's a big blow to our climate policy. It's a reminder that Congress needs to act because California is Exhibit A in the climate crisis.
Senator, you have been one of the few people who consistently and clearly mention and discuss the issue that there are two sides of a very important story. There is the immigration reform or immigration situation, and then there's the humanitarian crisis on the border. People who are trying to come to this country to ask for asylum. It's a petition, not even being allowed to do that. Then there's immigration reform, and you're talking about DACA, and you're talking about the 11 million people who have been here, many of them for decades, participating and contributing to our economy, and yet, so I'm very grateful that you are very clear in your definitions of things. But let's talk about MPP. There's an MPP 2.0 that Alan Orr was talking about that the Biden administration has instituted because of this situation in the Supreme Court. What should now be the policy on the border to deal with this humanitarian crisis, Senator?
The first, we've got to remind ourselves and everybody around us, somebody coming from any other country to seek asylum in the United States is allowed under not just our federal laws, but international law. It is not a crime to seek asylum, but our asylum system is broken. We do need a border that is safe. We do need a border that is orderly, but we also need a border that is humane. And that is what was lacking under the prior administration, and the Supreme Court ruling today, and hopefully a similar conclusion to the Title 42 debate, I think can push this administration in that direction. That's the bottom line.
Senator, let's talk a little bit more broadly about this session overall. Do you see a pattern in this particular court's decision-making?
I think I'm very concerned. Despite the decision on the Remain in Mexico program here this morning, we saw what the Supreme Court did years ago when it came to voting rights. But just this session alone, the extreme wing, the conservative wing of the Supreme Court, undoing 50 years of protection of Roe v. Wade, the decision on the concealed carry case out of New York, rolling back gun safety at a worst possible time in the wake of the Uvalde tragedy, among others. And now this ruling that undermines the federal government's ability to tackle the climate crisis, which is real, existential, and here today. It's a clear and present danger. Not something theoretic for 15, 20 years from now. So the Supreme Court has, I think, hurt itself in terms of people having confidence in it because of the justification of many of the rulings. Look at the Roe v. Wade decision. The way they went about that now calls into question so many other rights and protections that we've enjoyed for years. And so Supreme Court reform, I think, is very much on the table. And I will also mention this, Jose, because there is a bright spot here. Today is the day that we will see the swearing in of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. So it doesn't tilt the numbers on the Supreme Court, but it certainly gives me hope.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, of course, we're going to be mentioning that today. When you talk about Supreme Court reform is on the table, what do you mean by that, Senator?
Well, look, I know there's a lot of ideas on the table about the Supreme Court. We've got to start with accountability. We've got to start with ethics. Just take one example that most people are, if not should be familiar with, Justice Thomas's wife and her involvement with the January 6th insurrection of last year, and then Justice Thomas not recusing himself on cases that stem from that deadly insurrection. Clearly, the Supreme Court and the justices on the Supreme Court are in need of more ethics and accountability.
And Senator, I want to ask you about this tragedy in San Antonio. It's the deadliest human smuggling case ever in the U.S. 53 people dead. They were essentially burned to death inside this tractor trailer. No air, no water, and they're still not able to identify all of them. What's your reaction to this?
My heart's broken. It's 53, not just migrants, it's 53. For somebody, it was a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter. And why were they coming to the United States? So desperate for a better life and better opportunity that they're willing to risk their lives, and in this case, gave their lives in pursuit of a dream. It's a tragic example of how broken our immigration systems are. Two things I got to mention, Jose. Number one, anybody who has a problem with irregular migration, is what we call it, then needs to commit to investing in fixing the immigration laws in the United States so that we have better, robust, and more orderly legal migration. People are coming here to work. Plain and simple. Talk to any business leader and economist, and they'll tell you there's a labor shortage in America today, and it's leading to the inflation that we're all paying the price for. Number one. Number two, a lot of my Republican colleagues say, well, no, we're not going to address immigration because we got to punish the cartels, whether it's the Remain in Mexico program as it existed, or forcing people to try to come to the United States under these deadly conditions. That is continuing to reward the bad actors. Let's fix our immigration system, improve our economy, and by God, be the humane United States of America that most people around the world respect us for, or have in the past.
And boy, I mean, Senator, you want to talk about punishing the cartels. There are hundreds of millions of dollars being made by these human exploiters throughout the area, precisely because of the reality of the immigration reality in our country. They are making hundreds of millions of dollars off the suffering and, yes, death of innocent people. Senator Alex Padilla, I thank you for being with us, as always.
Thank you, Jose. Have a good day.